And he said, I did not succeed in life by intelligence. I succeeded because I have a long attention span. Welcome everybody to Catch the Zenith, the podcast where I talk about high performance and business. My name is Nicola. I currently work in software sales. And today we've got another episode of Zenith Reflections, which is a format where I reflect upon my week, talk about ideas I had, things I picked up, lessons I learned, and everything in between. The first thing I want to discuss today is why I believe attention or focus is the new IQ. Now, Mark Manson, the author of the book The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, he once said, "Lots in the world is a war for attention, and our minds are the battlefield." And I think that's very much true. And it's also interesting to observe that right now, our phones, which were initially designed to make us more productive, leave us more and more scatterbrained. And also, our impulse control gets constantly tested. And if we don't pay careful attention, in the blink of an eye, we fall maybe into a hedonistic lifestyle. There are so many different things that are fighting for our attention. And I believe it has never been so easy to be successful because we live in an abundance of information. We have books, we have video courses, we have podcasts. But at the same time, it has never been easy to simply do nothing. To do nothing at all. To just participate in the rat race of constantly checking our phones, playing signaling games on social media, and avoiding real-life experiences, because everything is more or less at our fingertips. We can order food at home, take out. If you want to access the most beautiful people on earth, you just can go on social media or other shady sites. So we live in a world where focus, where impulse control is more and more important because there are so many different opportunities we can pursue. And I think that's exactly the superpower right now, impulse control. And there's an interesting quote by Charlie Munger, who I think died last year, 2 years ago. He's the former business partner of Warren Buffett. And he said, I did not succeed in life by intelligence. I succeeded because I have a long attention span. And I think this is largely what I needed to hear when I was younger. You don't need to be the next Einstein. Instead, if you learn to focus for 12 hours straight, if you have a strong impulse control, you can outwork most people by an order of magnitude. So, in a world where every hour, every minute, maybe every second we get tested, whether it's our phone sending us notifications if we haven't turned them off, or we walk by McDonald's and we need to resist the temptation to eat junk food. I think there's so many things that are pretty challenging, but if we can test ourselves over and over again and resist those tiny impulses and say no to the bad things and yes to the good things, our focus, our impulse control becomes bigger and bigger, because a lot of people right now talk about focus, but what this actually means is impulse control, because you could pursue 10 different things, or you could say yes to one big thing, and then you have a strong impulse control and strong focus, because focus basically means saying no to everything else except for one thing. Obviously, there are some exceptions, but more or less that's how I would define it. And one author or professor that makes a great argument for more focus in a world of distraction is Cal Newport. He wrote the book Deep Work, and he wrote, The ability to perform deep work is becoming increasingly rare. At exactly the same time, it is becoming increasingly valuable in our economy. As a consequence, the few who cultivate this skill and then make it the core of their working life will thrive. By the way, a great read, Deep Work by Col Newport. And it's interesting to observe right now. If I hit the gym and I look around, there are so many people using their phones all the time. They're either on social media, checking WhatsApp or other things. And sometimes I do the same and I remind myself, like, don't do that, man. Just like pull up a podcast or listen to music, but just do one thing. Because you really very much destroy your ability to focus all the time. And by the way, what I'm discussing right now here is just a friendly reminder to myself, because sometimes I also fall into the tendency to constantly check my phone, but then I feel like terrible because my ability to focus, which is one of my core strengths, decreases. And I don't want that to happen. And I think one important way how we can improve our focus is not only doing one thing at a time, like deep work. This is foundational work, I believe. But more important, to test yourself constantly in everyday situations. So when you're working out, you're not using your phone. Or in the beginning, you pull up a podcast, but then you're not anymore allowed to use your phone, except if you have maybe a great idea you want to write down. So you have certain rules. Or when waiting in a queue at the supermarket, grocery store, instead of pulling out your phone, you resist the urge to pull out your phone. You test yourself. Or while working, if you feel like, oh, I could check Instagram or I could check WhatsApp, maybe somebody shoot me a message, you resist the urge to do that. You don't do it. And if you do that many, many times throughout the day, in many small, tiny circumstances that don't require too much impulse control, just a little bit, it will add up and it will compound over time. And after a certain period, you will be a monster. Focus will be your superpower. And I can tell you, you can go very far. At least this is what happened in my case. I came to a point where I can focus for 10, 11, or 12 hours straight without making a proper break. And this is very much at my peak time, I would say. I went thus far. And I was saying you should do that, but I'm just telling you what's possible if you live a very, very focused, mindful life. And people sometimes ask me if I meditate. And I have meditated in the past, but I see meditation more as the art of doing nothing or the art of doing one thing. And if you do one thing very intense, it feels like meditation to a certain degree. All this to say that you can be, and I think circling back to what Charlie Munger said, that he didn't succeed by his level of intelligence, but by his level of focuses. And I think that's so powerful because you can outwork so many people if you just have obviously a strong work ethic, and you don't need to be that smart if you just get in the reps and you become better and you constantly challenge yourself. Because that's actually what I did in university and also right now. There are way smarter people. I met many people, especially doing my master's degree, right now writing my master thesis. I met very smart people, way smarter than I am. And I realize if I want to compete with those folks, I need to put in more work. And give you a very practical example. Mathematics. Back in high school days, I wasn't considering myself a very good mathematician. Actually, I spoke over myself, I'm not good at math. But then I got into my undergrad time, and I became very decent in math because I stopped speaking over myself that I'm bad in math, and I put in more effort. Long hours. I practiced certain examples, exercises over and over again, those math problems, until I had them in my DNA. And Still, I believe there are way people that had a better logical understanding of math problems, but I became good to a point where my grades were pretty solid. And just by putting in a little bit more effort, maybe someone else needs 2 hours for a certain set of math problems, and I needed maybe double the time, 4 hours, but that's okay. And I'm just saying, and I'm not making the claim here we should focus on our weaknesses, because I would make the argument focusing on our strength and strengthening the strengths is the better approach. I'm just saying that if you are not that smart, you still can outcompete a lot of people if you just work harder with a better focus. That's the first thing I wanted to discuss. Attention or focus is the new IQ. Second thing, quite an interesting one. The 4 types of safety a woman wants from a man. I recently listened to a podcast on modern wisdom with Chris Williamson, and he interviewed Adam Lane Smith, who helps people improve their relationship. And they talked about many different things, challenges men have right now, and one thing he shared was 4 types of safety a woman wants from a man. The first one is physical safety. So, and I try to paraphrase, I'm paraphrasing here. If I'm not getting everything right, please excuse that. But I understood it as physical safety is protection from physical harm, historically from predators or enemies, now from danger or even the man himself. She needs to feel physically secure in his presence. So the first thing a woman wants in terms of safety is physical safety. The man can protect the woman. The second thing is resource safety. The ability to provide or manage resources like food, shelter, or finances. Even if she contributes, she wants to know he will step up when a crisis hits. So resource safety is the second one. And before we continue, just mentioning here, there are exceptions, there are outliers, but I found that framework very helpful and to understand women better. The third one is emotional safety, the freedom to express her thoughts and emotions without a fear of anger, judgment, or instability. She wants a man who listens with respect, responds calmly, and doesn't blow up. So you don't have emotional outbursts all the time. If she shares something with you that is maybe not so pleasant, and you also first seek to understand before you want to be understood. In other words, you listen, you mirror what you said, you try to understand, you ask follow-up questions, and maybe later you share some advice. And the fourth one is bonding safety. So consistent signals that he is emotionally and biochemically bounded to her. And this includes affection, romance, warmth, reassurance. He won't abandon her. In other words, if there's a adverse situation, a difficult time in the relationship, the woman feels safe that the man will not run away. So you're stuck with each other. You're all in. So all this to say, 4 types. Number 1, physical safety, resource safety, emotional safety, and 4th, bonding safety. Found that very interesting. Third thing I want to discuss today is a sales lesson, but also beyond that, a lesson in general of human psychology. I'm currently reading for the 3rd time the book Cold Calling Sucks, and that's why it works, because I work right now in a software startup, and it gives you basically a blueprint of how to conduct cold calls, how to cold call people, because that's right now my job. I need to bring in new prospects, in other words, potential customers, and our main acquisition channel is cold calling. And the author in that book, or one of those authors, wrote, "People act on problems more than benefits. Human beings are more motivated to take action to get rid of pain than they are to achieve benefits. If someone has a headache, they're going to take the Advil, this pill. But even if people know that there's a health benefits to taking a multivitamin, people are far less likely to jump out of their seat to take one. Why I'm sharing that? I think, especially in sales, but also beyond that, when pitching something, a lot of people start directly, immediately with the solution. Like, we are company X, we help those kind of folks solve X by those three steps, via those 3 steps. But people first need to understand why the solution is important in the first place. So you need to make clear what's the problem, and then you can transition to the solution. And if you first start with the problem, you understand the prospect, or you make it seem that you understand the prospect, they are way more receptive to your pitch down the line. And now beyond that, this is also called, I think, being a good human being, first seeking to understand before you want to be understood. You first, if someone is telling you or sharing a challenge they have in their life, you first want to understand. You want to understand the problem. And I like more the word challenge, but for the sake of this episode, problem. And then, but if you transition in too fast to giving advice, the person is not that much receptive to everything what you're saying. They think, I haven't asked for advice. You're giving me unsolicited advice I'm not very open for. But if you first listen, you mirror, basically retelling what the other person said in your own words, and you ask follow-up questions, you go deeper, then later on you can give some advice, you can share advice, but not the other way around. And people need to be first remembered what their problem actually is, especially in sales. I would make the argument, and later the solution. And I think that is also important when it comes to copywriting. I purchased a coaching program back in 2022 in the US. It helped me to build up my own coaching business, which I was working on at that time. And one of the core things I learned is a good copy, in most cases, in some cases, starts first with the problem, and then steps and the solution, but not directly with the solution. People first, you need to grab their attention. And why is that important? Because people act on problems more than benefits. You just tell them, this is great, and this is great, as opposed to saying, hey, this is your problem because of this. The person will feel like, wow, the other person understands me 100%. And then transitioning to the solution. Found it a valuable lesson, which is not only true in sales, but also beyond that. Fourth thing I want to share today is some thoughts about authenticity. Alex Hormozi, a renowned entrepreneur, can highly recommend his books, wrote on his X account, authenticity is how you behave when you have zero threat of punishment. It's when what you think, what you say, and what you do are the same. The problem is, most people don't know what they think. They suck at communicating, and they are afraid of getting into trouble. Why am I bringing that up? Sometimes I said in the past, oh, this person is a very authentic person. Or this person, super authentic. But what does that actually mean? And according to his definition, it means authenticity is how you behave when you have zero threat of punishment. So maybe you know that if you're with very good friends, you behave like, oh, I can really be myself. And this is exactly that. You have zero threat of punishment. You can be more or less 100% yourself. And there are other circumstances, other environments, maybe at work, maybe with some other friends you don't know that well, where we behave a little bit different. And that is completely normal, obviously. But I just thought that's a very interesting approach how to understand authenticity. And also the alignment of three things: what we think internally, what's going on in our mind, then what we say out loud, and then our actions. And I think that's also very important when it comes to confidence, because we have certain detectors or sensors in our mind. And if there's a mismatch between what we think, what we say, and what we do, we take notice, we pick that up. And if we do that over and over again, and if we betray ourselves, we see ourselves lower in a hierarchy level with other people. Because you do mistakes, you commit a sin. And I define sin, I think I learned that from Peterson, as missing the target. You miss the target and you take notice, and you again miss the target, and your confidence becomes lower and lower and lower. But if you don't miss the target, if you hit the target, you build up confidence. You become more confident, and things start to fall into place. And at least that's what I experienced in my life. If I lived an authentic life and those three things were aligned, because it's normal that those three things occasionally are not aligned, quite often. But if you prove yourself many, many times that those three things, that if you say something, you do it. If you say something, you do it. This muscle of commitment and reliability becomes bigger. And another way how we can access authenticity, at least from my humble perspective, is telling the truth, or what you think to be true, or what you think in general. If we truly say what we think in a way that people can understand, without being afraid to get in trouble, although that can happen, to be afraid, people will perceive you more as authentic. Because a lot of people, and I include myself in the past in that category, we want to conform to so many different things. But if we truly say what we believe, if we are a little bit more disagreeable, people will respect you more. And this can mean if you think you're doing great work at your job, you prepare a quick presentation, a PowerPoint presentation, and show precisely what you achieved and what you did for that company. And maybe you have already different offer, and you say clearly, hey, look, this is what I brought to the table. I've already different offer. I would like to have a raise. And that can be very, very scary. But sometimes it's important to stand up and say actually what you think. I deserve a higher salary. That's just one example of many. Or when you're dealing with a friend, this friend is constantly like leaving your needs behind and always deciding on behalf of you and not giving you the freedom to express yourself, after a certain period you might say, hey man, look, today I feel like I will decide. And then you're having maybe a little dispute, or it comes to a discussion, but that's exactly what you should have if your interest is to have a deep, meaningful friendship or relationship with someone. So, number 4, main takeaway, authenticity is how you behave when you have zero threat of punishment. Number 6, what I want to discuss today is a quote by podcaster Chris Williamson. He wrote, "There is no such thing as being overworked, only under-rested. You can deal with pretty much anything if you get a good night's sleep, good food, and sufficient movement. Taking your rest ethic more seriously as your work ethic is a hack to enjoy life more and get stuff done as a side effect." Why I agree with this statement. Quick story. So I did an internship back in 2023 in the US. And at that time, I was running a coaching business and doing this internship. And I was pretty much working all the hours of the day, except when I was working out. or using the restroom, obviously. Now, at that point, or at that time, I slept my 8 hours at pretty much the same times every day. I went to sleep in 8:30 p.m. I woke up in 4:30 p.m. So I had 4 hours of sleep. Then I paid careful attention, more or less, to what I eat. My nutrition was pretty much on point. I had some cheat meals, maybe once a week, twice, but everything else was on point. I had a healthy diet. And the last thing is, I worked out 5 times per week. So I paid careful attention on the basics: movement, sleep, movement, nutrition. And because I did that, I worked for 5-ish months straight, almost all the time, with some exceptions. And that just was a proof to myself that you can go way beyond what you think is possible by just making sure you get proper rest and you do the basics. And you treat yourself, you treat your sleep like a pro athlete. You sleep at the same time every day, 8 hours or more. And you're way more productive. Because sometimes, that's just my observation, people who claim they have a burnout, I'm not judging, there are terrible burnouts, I'm very feeling sorry for those folks, but there's also a part of, that's your own responsibility. And I don't mean that in a, this is your responsibility way. No, more in a way like, I observed that those folks maybe don't get proper rest, they don't sleep enough, they don't eat good food, and they don't do sport. And obviously, life can be very challenging. You have maybe a family, children, work, so many different things. But getting those things right, I think, is so important. Otherwise, everything else will fall apart. And it's very a vicious cycle, because if you maybe don't sleep that much hours, your impulse control is impaired or lower, not that good. And then you eat crappy food. And if you eat crappy food, you think, oh, now fuck it, I will not work out. So it's very much this downward spiral which we want to avoid. So treating our sleep like a pro athlete, like a champion, like a fixed commitment. Like at 10 p.m. I'm going to sleep. This is non-negotiable, for instance. And I'm not saying we can deviate from time to time. I'm doing that myself, but I've proven to myself I can be very consistent with that. And your feeling, how your body feels, it's crazy how good you feel if you do that for an extended period of time. I think the first time I started to do that was very consistent, like every single day, same hours, etc. was, I think, in 2022 or 2021. And I already was very much into high performance stuff, paying attention on a lot of different things, but it improved my well-being. So there's no such thing as being overworked, only underrested. The last thing I want to discuss today is, again, an idea of Chris Williamson. He said, most problems are easily fixed. 90% of issues can be solved by a good sleep, a glass of water, a gym session, a walk outdoors, or a chat with a friend. Maybe you have experienced that situation. You feel terrible somehow. Your mood is bad. You don't feel good. And you have maybe those thoughts in your mind, those extremes like this is because of this, and you don't feel very well. But I would make the argument, and I see it similar like Chris, that if you make sure you're proper hydrated, you have slept 8 hours, you have a good night's sleep, not 6 hours, not 5 hours. You work out to improve your dopamine levels. You go for a walk in nature, or you talk to a good friend and you share what's not working for you. You will feel better. And it's not the end of the world. And to build up on that, he also said, your negative inner voice is easy to banish. And he quoted here Dylan O. He said, I walk somewhere, in terms of how to banish your inner negative voice. I walk somewhere, I run someplace, I lift something heavy, I eat something healthy, I read something good, I write down something, or write something down, and only then do I take my bad mood seriously. I think that makes it very practical. If you're in a bad mood, or allegedly in a bad mood, first do the basics. Drink water, go for a walk, whatever. And then, if you're still feeling bad, go deeper and and think about what else can I do. And fair enough, there are if there are things bothering us, processing them is very important. What I like to do is, if there's something on my mind that keeps spinning, I'm ruminating over it over and over again. And quite frankly, I have that now almost never, to the extent I had it when I was way younger, when I was a teenager. I have a pretty calm mind right now, but I worked for that with a lot of healthy habits. It feels pretty good. But if there's something coming up, I try to confront myself in excruciating details. I confront myself with this ugly thing. And I prefer to do that verbally on my commute home, on my motorcycle. So I have a quick chat with myself, or I write it down. Although I don't do that often. I like more speaking it out loud. And if I go back to the thing that initially bugged me, and I confront it again, and I ask myself, why is that bugging me? Why am I bothered? Interestingly, this feeling of this negative feeling vanishes. It goes away over time. And I'm not saying from today to tomorrow, but pretty quickly. Sometimes it does, especially if there's a more superficial thing. And I think that's a common practice in many psychological schools, where they let the patient confront themselves with the thing that bugs them. So let's do an example. If you have nightmares, common practice is to confront yourself immediately when you woke up after the nightmare in a very detailed manner what you just dreamt, what you was dreaming about. And if you do that over and over again, over a very long period, maybe it decreases your nightmares you have. And there's no medical advice. It can work, maybe it doesn't work. At least I didn't have nightmares, but that's what I heard. I think I learned that from Peterson, not entirely sure. I think it was in one of his books. But the common practice, the idea is just, if there's something bothering you, confront yourself. And it's hard, it's uncomfortable, it requires a lot of energy, but it's way better than the alternative. What's the alternative? The alternative is to do nothing and live with it and and think that's a pretty miserable experience because you still have it not processed. And there are folks out there, they have this huge burden carrying around with them because they haven't processed certain things. And in my example, I had once an incident back when I was in school, long time ago. I was a young boy, and that was bugging me. That was bothering me for so many years. And then finally, I started to confront myself on my commute home over and over again, multiple times. And all of a sudden, those thoughts I had about this incident became less and less. And now I'm at a point where I have a super calm mind. But this calm mind needs consistent effort. And one part of it is a healthy lifestyle, obviously. And the other part of it is confrontation with things that are not so nice, not going so well in your life. All right. So that was number 6. Most problems are easily fixed by just doing the basics. And with that said, guys, thanks for listening. And as a thank you for tuning in, I've put together a list of 100 plus podcast episodes I loved most. There are in that list episodes on health, wealth, relationships, my top 10 best picks ever, the episodes I love the most, and many more things. You will find that below. Just click the link, download the list for free, and by downloading the list, you will get signed up to my newsletter as well, where I share every Sunday a new issue, similar to what I just did today: learnings, lessons learned, quotes from the week, videos, content I consumed, all the good stuff, it's in there. So thank you guys, and have a good week.